What's up and welcome back. You followed me down the yellow brick road. I'm John Stark from MacTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And no one mourns the wicked except perhaps the Wizard of Oz. Actually, I don't think he. Anyway, um, but this is my review of The Wizard of Oz, which is from 1939, which means it is celebrating an anniversary year this year. The Wizard of Oz turns 85. 85. Isn't that nuts? Isn't that just bonkers to think this film is 85 years old? Um, so when you hear somebody who's like, I remember seeing The Wizard of Oz back when it came out and I was little, that person has wisdom. Because that person is about to hit triple digits if they remember being a child in The Wizard of Oz. Make sure to ask them all of the questions in the world and get all of that knowledge. But and what the theater was like and what theaters were like back then when they had these single screen, giant uh sort of amazing. I mean, some of those are beautiful theaters. If you've ever seen, I'm a blind film critic. I know. I used to be able to see. So, spoiler alert. Now I don't, which is why I'm able to comment on both of it and talk about accessibility. But yeah, some of them have been gorgeous, just gorgeous theaters that they put the work into. Like nothing that we get nowadays. Nowadays, they just pop up a theater. It's got walls and sound, and I mean the curtains and just everything. Some of those were gorgeous theaters. I know they've tried to keep and restore a few from back in the day, but um, most of them have been lost to time. So, yeah, The Wizard of Oz, which they thought was going to flop. Like, this premiered in, I don't even need to do the research. I think it premiered in, like, Minnesota, if I'm right. Didn't, I think one of the things was that there was one of the Munchkins or something like that was from a town and they premiered it in Minnesota. The Wizard of Oz wasn't expected to be this huge holiday hit. It didn't this huge hit the way that they thought it was going to be, um, like iconic. Do you know what I'm saying? So they just films had to fight for screen space and double bookings and double showings, and sometimes you watch one movie and then watch another. Like you'd have a double feature. So and you'd have like a top billing and a second billing. There were drive-ins too later on that movies and a movie like The Wizard of Oz has benefited from having re-releases over the years, which was something that happened a lot. So eventually it's garnered so much attention, so much acclaim, so much box office. But yeah, the studio didn't really have a lot of faith in this. Of course, there's so many stories about The Wizard of Oz. Uh, about the treatment of Judy Garland, about the paint that was worn by the Tin Man. You know, I just there's the old the the sort of what I want to say, the ghost story about the Wizard of Oz, where there's that scene where you can supposedly can see that one of the Munchkins, Munchkins hung themselves, which they said that's not what it was. It was some set prop or something like that. But like they would admit to it, by the way, first of all. But if it had happened, if they kept it in the movie, no, this is something else. That wasn't a dead Munchkin. Uh, but yeah, it has one of those things, sort of like Three Men and a Little Lady had that weird cardboard cutout that made people think there was like a ghost in that one scene. Anyway, yes, yeah, there's all that stuff, but it's it's something that's played regularly over the holidays without actually having any connection to the holidays. Like they never celebrate a holiday within the Wizard of Oz. Um, it's this amazing Technicolor wonder. And this is my first time watching as a blind person with audio description. And I've seen The Wizard of Oz plenty of times and all the musical numbers and it's delightful to watch and even to watch it watching it now and being fully aware of my own sexuality and watching some of these actors playing these characters and being like, I don't like some of these characters are very gay. I don't know that people realize that. Um, but it's amazing how this film has captured the hearts of everyone ever since, and stands as being, you know, the I don't know, the single greatest adaptation of the source material. Yes, you have The Wiz. I don't want to say The Wiz isn't The Wiz is a great spin on it, as is Wicked, by the way. Is why you can put a spin on something and do something different, is because you see it sort of successfully being done even with The Wizard of Oz. And The Wizard of Oz is not like 100%. It doesn't include everything that was in the book. And obviously, Frank Baum didn't write musical numbers into the book. So that was something that they did on their own. Um, but there have been so many other adaptations throughout the years that have taken and put their own little spin on The Wizard of Oz. But yet this one still remains. Friends of Dorothy has an entirely different meaning than what you probably think it means. Those ruby slippers, man, every time they trade hands or somebody tries to bid on them, it always, like, there's the news. It's like, where are the ruby slippers? Like, somebody's always trying to bid on the ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz. They're like iconic. And I always, they're one of the, probably one of the most iconic pieces of film, like, of any sort of prop or costume, are the ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz. When you think about, like, when you're trying to narrow it down to what, you know, what is uniquely cinematic, not just like Batman's costume. Well, of course, well, Batman's costume was also in the comic books, but um, so I mean, it was, the costume designers had something to work with there, but here they're just sort of described in text. There isn't like a visual thing that came along necessarily with it to give that sort of shine that Judy Garland's wearing in this. But um, a great performance from Judy, who was on a lot of drugs, not by her choice. I mean, like, not, she wasn't a drug addict, but I mean, she was on a lot of drugs. The working conditions for child actors back then were not great, and it's amazing that that we got this performance out of her, that she was treated the way that she was, and has this iconic of a performance. And we just never give Julie Garland quite the credit that she deserves for being one of the greatest child actors. I think she just seems so mature every time she's on screen that it's almost like you think she's an adult, but she's not. I think she was 14 when she made this. So, yeah, it definitely one of the best that was out there. Um, I love The Wizard of Oz. It's such an iconic classic movie I've seen dozens of times. But the audio description, my God, this is one of the best audio description tracks I've ever heard. Talk about really understanding what it is that you're getting into and describing, the transitions in terms of the color, and trying to captivate and catch the look of the transition into the vibrance when we transitioned to Oz. I thought that was really well done and brilliant. Just the description, the opportunity to use every moment to describe Oz as much as humanly possible, but also to describe before Oz, and to describe these characters, you know, as they're ultimately sort of like representations of things that she dreams about or visits, depending on how you look at The Wizard of Oz. Um, and the initial character descriptions of Auntie M and her family at the farm is all great, and Toto's mentioned quite a bit in the audio description. Um, the introduction to Oz I thought was great. The musical numbers. Um, they do what I prefer, which is to not talk through the musical number, talk on top of singing, but yet they found a way to sort of use the instrumental breaks to help support, letting you know what's happening. I think it's a brilliant audio description track. It's one of the best I think I've ever heard. I would point to this and be like, wow, this one blew me away. It feels like it does everything right. It feels like it's the perfect narrator choice. It's somebody who feels like who else could possibly have done this? I wouldn't change anything about it. Um, and when you think about something like The Wizard of Oz, you're like, of course, somebody's going to want it's so iconic for Warner Brothers that they're going to want this to be, don't mess with this, like make this as iconic so that it can stay, um, so that it can maintain its legendary status and be passed down generation to generation to generation. So, I'm obviously not old enough to have seen this in its original theatrical release. I'm not even sure the first time I saw Wizard of Oz, but I know I've seen it. I know I've seen it a dozen times, but I can't even tell you when the first time was I saw it. I just know that it's sort of ubiquitously been throughout my whole life, just always been there. So great music. Judy Garland's voice is beautiful. The audio description is fantastic. There's nothing that you were going to hear in this that you didn't already know. And if you want to know more about The Wizard of Oz, there are people who've written entire books. I mean, like, I was not the person to come here and talk about. I wanted to mention the audio description and to sing its praises. Because somewhere over the rainbow, there's some fantastic audio description for this movie. It's waiting. So if you haven't had an opportunity to check out The Wizard of Oz with audio description, it's celebrating its 85th anniversary. There's never been a better time. So it's on Max, and it's the year of Wicked. So now it's a great time to find out uh, who did land on. I can't even spoil it because we haven't had Wicked in part 2. Anyway. Only those of us who have seen the musical know what's happening. So, of course, I'm giving The Wizard of Oz an A+. This is an iconic, legendary movie, and I'm a friend of Dorothy and have no reason to not be. So I love this, and it takes me back every time. I'm so glad it has an excellent audio description track. Thank you for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you down the yellow brick road in the merry old land of Oz.